The Horizon of Doubt. Navigating the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Introduction. Have you ever observed how the most strident voices in any discourse often belong to those with the shallowest comprehension? Conversely, the genuine virtuosos, those who have devoted years to the meticulous refinement of their craft, typically speak with a measured, intricate caution. This paradox has long captivated the minds of thinkers. As the estimable philosopher Bertrand Russell sagely remarked, the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts. This stark dichotomy between unassailable conviction and profound uncertainty is not merely an observation of human foibles, it is an intrinsic facet of how we apprehend our own knowledge and capabilities. Why is it that those possessing the least understanding are so frequently convinced of their omniscience, while those who truly master a subject tend to be acutely aware of its intricate tapestry and the boundless expanse of what remains undiscovered? This volume embarks on an exhaustive exploration of precisely this question. This peculiar divergence between self-assurance and actual proficiency is precisely what psychologists Justin Kruger and David Dunning illuminated in their seminal research. They identified a compelling cognitive bias, now universally recognized as the Dunning-Kruger effect. In its most elemental form, it describes the propensity for individuals with limited aptitude in a given domain to overestimate their own competence. They do not merely err occasionally, they often harbor the profound conviction that their performance far surpasses their actual achievements. It is, in essence, a double curse. The very deficiency in skill that precipitates substandard performance simultaneously incapacitates these individuals from recognizing their own ineptitude. Envision a novice attempting to master a new language. If their grasp extends only to a handful of rudimentary phrases, they might experience a surge of elation, believing themselves to be well on the path to fluency. They have yet to confront the labyrinthine intricacies of grammar, the subtle cadences of pronunciation, or the sheer immensity of vocabulary requisite for true mastery. This limited exposure insulates them from the true scope of their ignorance. The Dunning-Kruger effect, corroborated by studies spanning from the assessment of vehicular acumen among motorists to the knowledge base of firearms owners, consistently reveals this pattern. The less one knows, the more one presumes to know. Conversely, those who possess genuine expertise frequently underestimate their own abilities, perhaps because what appears effortless to them proves arduous for others, leading them to erroneously assume a universal ease. To truly apprehend this phenomenon, we must contemplate the nature of knowledge itself. Conceive of our understanding as an expanding sphere. The interior of this sphere represents that which we apprehend, the facts, the skills, the concepts we have assimilated. But what of the vast, uncharted territory beyond its perimeter? That is the realm of the unknown. In the nascent stages of learning, our sphere of knowledge is diminutive. Consequently, the boundary separating what we know from what we do not, our horizon of doubt, is likewise relatively circumscribed. We remain largely oblivious to the immensity of what remains to be learned, and this limited awareness can foster a deceptive sense of confidence. As our knowledge accrues and our sphere enlarges, a remarkable transformation occurs. The circumference of our sphere, the liminal zone where our knowledge interfaces with the unknown, also expands. This implies that as we ascend to greater expertise, we become increasingly cognizant of the sheer magnitude of that which we do not comprehend. The expert possesses not merely more facts, they cultivate a more profound appreciation for the subject's inherent complexity and interconnectedness. They grasp that each answer can engender further inquiries, and that what once appeared a simple concept may harbor layers of nuance previously unconsidered. It is as if the more one perceives, the more one realizes there is to perceive. This burgeoning awareness of the unknown is not an indictment of inadequacy, but a definitive hallmark of genuine understanding and an indispensable precursor to true sagacity. This expanding apprehension of our own limitations constitutes the very essence of what we term intellectual humility. It is not synonymous with timidity or a deficiency in confidence regarding that which one does know. Rather, intellectual humility is the candid acknowledgement that one's knowledge and convictions are finite and potentially fallible. It entails recognizing that there is perpetually more to acquire and a genuine openness to novel information and divergent perspectives, even when they challenge one's extant viewpoints. It is about acknowledging the immensity of the unrevealed and a willingness to revise one's understanding in light of emergent evidence. This stands as the direct counteragent to the hubris that characterizes the Dunning-Kruger effect. While the unskilled may be blinded by their own ignorance, the intellectually humble individual actively endeavors to delineate the boundaries of their knowledge. This is not a vulnerability, it is a profound strength. It is the practical virtue that inoculates against arrogance, propels continuous learning, and facilitates a more accurate and realistic self-appraisal. It is the quiet assurance that arises not from the belief in possessing all knowledge, but from faith in one's capacity for learning and adaptation. This book extends an invitation to traverse the captivating terrain of our own cognitive landscapes, to comprehend the subtle mechanisms by which our own certainty can lead us astray, and to uncover the profound potency inherent in embracing the horizon of our own doubt. In the ensuing chapters, we shall delve more deeply into the psychological underpinnings of the Dunning-Kruger effect, scrutinize its tangible ramifications across diverse disciplines, and, most crucially, delineate actionable strategies for cultivating intellectual humility. By comprehending this pervasive bias and actively nurturing our faculty for considered doubt, we can progress toward more accurate self-assessment, foster more profound learning, and navigate the intricate complexities of our world with enhanced wisdom and grace. Let us commence this voyage of discovery. Chapter 1. Understanding the Dunning-Kruger Effect. 1. What is the Dunning-Kruger effect? It is a curious phenomenon, is it not? We are inclined to assume that a greater depth of knowledge in a subject correlates directly with a greater certainty in one's understanding. This seems, on the surface, to be an entirely logical proposition. If one has dedicated years to the rigorous study of a topic, to the intricate mastery of its complexities, then, surely, a profound sense of security in one's grasp of it would naturally follow. Yet, the reality of how we perceive our own knowledge is a far more convoluted tapestry, and more often than not, the truth lies in a diametrically opposed direction. It is here, at this juncture, that we begin to encounter the Dunning-Kruger effect, a truly captivating twist in the narrative of human judgment. Consider, for a moment, an individual possessing only a rudimentary understanding of, say, the arcane rules of chess. They might execute a few moves, perhaps even achieve victory against another novice through sheer serendipity. Within the narrow confines of their limited comprehension, they might experience a distinct sense of accomplishment, even harboring the conviction that they possess a keen strategic insight into the game. Now, juxtapose this with the perspective of a grandmaster. This chess virtuoso comprehends the infinite permutations, the subtle stratagems, the profound tactical depths that unfurl across hundreds of moves. They are acutely cognizant of the vast ocean of chess knowledge they have navigated, and yet, they are also acutely aware of the immeasurable expanse that remains yet to be explored. This very awareness, this profound appreciation for complexity, can, paradoxically, engender a greater degree of caution, a more pronounced humility, in their pronouncements regarding their own prowess. It is a veritable paradox. The less one knows, the more one believes one knows, and conversely, the more one knows, the more acutely aware one becomes of the vastness of what one does not know. This, in essence, is the very heart of the Dunning-Kruger effect. At its foundational core, it speaks to the intricate relationship between our capacity to appraise our own competence and the very competence we are endeavoring to assess. The skills requisite for excelling in a particular domain are frequently identical to the skills necessary for accurately recognizing one's own proficiency or lack thereof within that same domain. Reflect upon this. If one lacks an understanding of the fundamental tenets of grammar, how, then, can one possibly discern a poorly constructed sentence? If one has not acquired knowledge regarding healthful eating, how can one possibly offer an accurate evaluation of whether one's diet is, in truth, nutritionally sound? Those individuals who possess the least aptitude in a given area often find themselves ensnared by a dual affliction. Firstly, they are prone to making erroneous judgments and arriving at suboptimal conclusions. Secondly, their very deficiency robs them of the capacity to recognize the profound inadequacy of those judgments and conclusions. They are bereft of the metacognitive faculty, the ability to reflect upon their own cognitive processes, which would otherwise equip them to perceive their own errors. This is not an inherent inclination towards arrogance or boastfulness. For them, it represents a genuine deficit in self-awareness. They genuinely believe their performance to be exemplary because they lack the very tools that would enable them to perceive their deficiencies. We observe this phenomenon manifesting in an innumerable array of quotidian scenarios. Consider the novice driver who has recently attained their license. They may exude an almost unshakable confidence, perhaps even a degree of recklessness, convinced of their innate driving talent. They have yet to confront the exigencies of challenging weather conditions, the sudden appearance of unexpected hazards, or the intricate ballet of traffic that seasoned drivers navigate with practiced ease. They remain oblivious to the vast spectrum of driving proficiencies that lie beyond their current ken. In their limited experience, they have mastered the fundamentals, and this, to them, equates to mastery of the whole. Alternatively, contemplate an individual who has recently embarked upon a new avocation, such as learning a musical instrument. After a mere handful of weeks of diligent practice, they may achieve proficiency in executing a simple melody. A palpable sense of accomplishment washes over them, and they might even proclaim to their acquaintances, "I'm a natural at this." They are not yet attuned to the subtle techniques, the nuanced expressiveness, the profound musicality that distinguishes a true artist. Their initial success, while undeniably real, represents a minuscule speck against the vast panorama of musical mastery. They are, in essence, blind to the formidable mountain of skill that stretches out before them. The Dunning-Kruger effect is not an indictment of intentional deception. It is, rather, a manifestation of a fundamental chasm in self-perception. The very knowledge that would empower an individual to identify their own dearth of skill is precisely the knowledge they lack. This is the underlying reason why those with the most limited expertise often erroneously rate themselves as being above average. They are simply not equipped with the cognitive architecture to comprehend the benchmarks against which their performance is being measured. However, the effect does not terminate at this point. It possesses a mirrored counterpart, a surprising inverse that impacts those who are genuinely accomplished. While the incompetent tend towards overconfidence, the highly competent often exhibit a propensity to underestimate their own abilities in comparison to others. Why might this occur? Because, for experts, the skills and knowledge they possess have become so deeply ingrained, so utterly automatic, that they operate under the assumption that these are equally facile for everyone else. What feels effortless to them, they mistakenly infer, must therefore be effortless for all. Revisit, if you will, our chess grandmaster. They can perceive the unfolding of a game, anticipate moves, and formulate intricate strategies with an almost intuitive fluidity. To them, these insights may appear self-evident. They might, in their current state, overlook the years of dedicated study, the countless hours of practice, the inevitable missteps that punctuated their journey. When they observe others grappling with seemingly elementary concepts, they might ponder, why does this present such a formidable challenge? For them, it is so remarkably straightforward. This leads them to believe that their own abilities are not particularly exceptional, as they presume others share a similar degree of ease. It is at this juncture that the concept of intellectual humility assumes paramount importance. True expertise, in a curious twist of fate, frequently bestows upon its possessor a heightened awareness of their own inherent limitations. As our understanding of a subject deepens, so too does our appreciation for its inherent complexity. We begin to discern the subtle nuances, the exceptions to the established rules, the very frontiers where our knowledge remains incomplete. Our horizon of doubt expands. What once appeared uncomplicated and unequivocally clear begins to reveal strata of intricate complexity. Envision it as the exploration of an uncharted territory. Upon initial arrival, one might perceive a few gentle undulations and conclude, this is a modest, easily navigable locale. However, as one ventures further, vast mountain ranges, profound valleys, and hidden waterways are revealed. The more one explores, the more one apprehends the sheer immensity of the land that remains untrodden. This is precisely the phenomenon that transpires with knowledge. The more one acquires, the more one becomes cognizant of the colossal volume of what one does not know. This profound awareness is the hallmark of intellectual humility. This notion is intrinsically linked to the dichotomy of known knowns versus known unknowns. We all possess a certain body of knowledge that we are aware of possessing our known knowns. We also possess an awareness of certain things that we do not know are known unknowns. The Dunning-Kruger effect underscores a critical distinction. Those with diminished competence are frequently cognizant only of their known knowns. They remain blissfully oblivious to the expansive terrain of their known unknowns, let alone the even vaster dominion of their unknown unknowns, those things they are not even aware they do not know. This circumscribed scope of self-awareness is the very fuel that propels their unwarranted confidence. They are simply not perceiving the entirety of their cognitive landscape. The requisite skills for proficient task execution are, with remarkable frequency, identical to the skills necessary for an accurate appraisal of that execution. This constitutes the crux of the metacognitive deficit. If one lacks an understanding of the principles underpinning effective writing, one cannot possibly evaluate the quality of one's own prose. If one has not grasped the fundamental methodologies of scientific inquiry, one cannot adequately assess the veracity of one's own research. The instruments of competence are, in essence, also the instruments of self-assessment. So, how does this theoretical construct manifest in the tangible reality of the world, transcending mere abstract examples? Consider a study conducted among firearm owners, wherein researchers discovered that those individuals possessing the least knowledge about firearms were, paradoxically, often the most self-assured in their understanding and their adherence to safety protocols. They perceive themselves as highly skilled and responsible, yet they remain utterly unaware of critical safety procedures and the inherent potential dangers involved. Their deficiency in knowledge precluded them from recognizing their own shortcomings, thereby fostering a delusive sense of security. Another pertinent illustration emerges from the domain of health. Individuals who habitually engage in deleterious behaviors, such as smoking or maintaining an unhealthy diet, frequently exhibit a diminished capacity for accurately assessing their personal health risks. They may tend to downplay the inherent dangers, overestimate their body's inherent resilience, or harbor the conviction that they are healthier than their actual physiological state would suggest. The very knowledge that would empower them to accurately gauge their circumstances, an understanding of the long-term ramifications of their habits, the ability to recognize the incipient signs of illness, is precisely what they are lacking. Within academic environments, students who perform poorly on examinations often exhibit a tendency to overestimate their resultant scores. They might harbor the belief that they have performed admirably, only to be met with the disconcerting reality of a low grade. This is not attributable to a conscious effort to deceive themselves. Rather, it stems from a lack of comprehension of the subject matter that would otherwise equip them to accurately gauge their performance against the established evaluative criteria. They are, in essence, unaware of the extent of their own ignorance, and consequently, they are incapable of effectively judging the depth of their own knowledge. Even within professional spheres, the Dunning-Kruger effect can manifest with considerable subtlety. Envision a junior employee who has recently commenced their tenure in a new role. They might harbor the impression that they have rapidly assimilated the requisite tasks and are poised for advancement, overlooking the intricate nuances of client relationships, the complex dynamics of team collaboration, or the overarching strategic objectives of the organization. Their initial successes, while demonstrably real, are perceived through the limited lens of nascent experience. They have not yet acquired the seasoned judgment that accrues from years of navigating the inherent challenges and subtle intricacies of their chosen profession. Conversely, A seasoned professional, a physician with decades of accumulated experience, might be acutely attuned to the inherent limitations of medical knowledge. They are cognizant that even with the most sophisticated diagnostic tools, there exist cases that defy facile explanation, treatments that carry unforeseen side effects, and patients who respond in entirely unpredictable ways. This profound understanding of uncertainty and complexity can engender a greater degree of humility in their pronouncements, a more deliberate caution in their diagnoses, and a heightened openness to the possibility of error. They are not less competent. On the contrary, they are more profoundly aware of the vastness of what remains unknown, even within the confines of their own specialized field. This very awareness of what we do not know serves as the bedrock of intellectual humility. It is not an exercise in self-deprecation or a deficiency in confidence. It is, rather, a realistic and accurate calibration of our own knowledge and capabilities. It is an acknowledgement that the pursuit of learning is an unending odyssey, not a finite destination. The Dunning-Kruger effect imparts to us a crucial lesson. Our conviction in the accuracy of our knowledge is not invariably a reliable barometer of its validity. Indeed, at times, the most strident voices of certainty emanate from those who possess the least to be certain about. The practical ramifications of this effect are far-reaching and profound. In our personal lives, it can precipitate ill-advised decisions pertaining to our health, our financial stewardship, and our interpersonal relationships. In professional contexts, it can culminate in errors, missed opportunities, and internal team discord. On a societal level, it can contribute to the unchecked proliferation of misinformation, the entrenchment of polarized viewpoints, and the gradual erosion of public trust in established expertise. When individuals are incapable of recognizing the extent of their own ignorance, they are demonstrably less inclined to seek out accurate information or to heed the counsel of those who possess it. The Dunning-Kruger effect, therefore, transcends the realm of a mere intriguing psychological anomaly. It represents a fundamental challenge to our perception of ourselves and our position within the vast landscape of knowledge. It underscores the indispensable importance of critical introspection and the continuous pursuit of learning. Comprehending what the Dunning-Kruger effect entails lays the essential groundwork, but to truly navigate its treacherous currents, we must first delve into the underlying why of its persistence and the insidious manner in which its influence shapes our perceptions. The subsequent section will embark upon an exploration of the psychological and neurological factors that contribute to this pervasive cognitive bias. 2. How cognitive biases shape our thinking. Our minds, those astonishing engines of logic, creativity, and comprehension, are nonetheless prone to peculiar idiosyncrasies. They operate by their own internal logic, employing shortcuts that, while often efficient, can sometimes lead us profoundly astray. These mental shortcuts are precisely what we term cognitive biases, automatic, often unconscious, mechanisms our brains deploy to navigate the world with alacrity. Far from being inherently detrimental, these biases have historically served as crucial survival tools. However, in the intricate tapestry of modern existence, they can precipitate significant errors in judgment, particularly when we attempt to gauge the breadth of our knowledge or the depth of our proficiency. Consider the seemingly simple act of estimating the number of jelly beans concealed within a capacious jar. Your mind, in a flash, might offer a rough approximation, a cognitive shortcut, eschewing the Herculean task of individual enumeration. Yet, what if this swift conjecture is wildly inaccurate? This is the territory where biases exert their influence, acting as subtle, invisible currents that steer our thoughts, often without our conscious awareness. These biases are the clandestine sculptors of our self-image, playing a pivotal role in the genesis of the Dunning-Kruger effect. They are the veiled architects behind the paradox of the unskilled individual who perceives themselves as brilliant, and the true expert who harbors a sense of mere mediocrity. Let us first examine how these biases foster an unwarranted sense of confidence, a phenomenon particularly pronounced at the lower echelons of the Dunning-Kruger spectrum, where competence is scarce. A pervasive bias, known as the better-than-average effect, or its synonym, illusory superiority, predisposes us to believe we surpass the Majority in most endeavors. Reflect upon it. When queried about one's driving prowess, a significant majority will affirm their superiority. Statistically, this is an impossibility. Only approximately half can occupy that elevated position. This bias thus adorns our self-perception with rose-tinted spectacles, imbuing us with an inflated sense of skill and knowledge. Further fueling this overconfidence is the fundamental attribution error. This bias surfaces when we evaluate others. An individual's misstep is readily attributed to inherent character flaws, laziness, or a lack of intelligence. Conversely, our own errors are contextualized, ascribed to external circumstances. The traffic was abysmal, or I was simply having an off day. This selective lens renders our own mistakes as isolated anomalies, while others' transgressions are perceived as definitive proof of their deficiencies, impeding our capacity for honest self-appraisal. These biases converge to forge a potent illusion of infallibility. When one presumes inherent superiority and habitually attributes personal failures to external forces, an unwavering self-assurance can take root, irrespective of actual competence. The requisite knowledge to apprehend one's own limitations is absent, and the biases actively conspire to reinforce the delusion of adequacy. This explains with stark clarity why an individual possessing rudimentary public speaking skills might fancy themselves a natural orator. Their limited exposure to the nuances of effective elocution prevents them from recognizing their own awkward pauses, their uninspired content, or their monotonous delivery. Their brain, guided by these insidious biases, simply fails to perceive the void. However, the narrative does not conclude with the overconfident novice. Cognitive biases extend their reach to the highly competent, albeit in a divergent manner. While the less skilled are often blinded by an excess of self-assurance, the exceptionally proficient can fall victim to the trap of underestimation. One contributing factor is the curse of knowledge. Once a concept is deeply internalized, it becomes profoundly challenging to conceive of a state of ignorance regarding it. To an expert, a subject that demanded years of arduous study may appear self-evidently simple. The arduous learning process is forgotten. Its perceived ease leads to the assumption that it is equally accessible to all, thereby diminishing the perceived uniqueness of their own expertise. Then there is the false consensus effect, the inclination to overestimate the prevalence of our own beliefs, values, and behaviors in others. An expert, steeped in their field for years, may project their level of understanding and engagement onto others. A brief nod of agreement during a complex discussion might be misinterpreted as genuine comprehension, when in reality it is merely polite deference. This leads the expert to undervalue the distinctiveness of their insights, consequently underestimating their relative standing. Consider Dr. Anya Sharma, a luminary in astrophysics. Her ability to elucidate stellar formation is so fluid, so effortless, that it resembles the recitation of a nursery rhyme. Her profound understanding has become so ingrained that when confronted with a student grappling with fundamental concepts like gravity, she might inwardly ponder, why is this so arduous for them? It is quite straightforward. She is experiencing the curse of knowledge. She may fail to recall the immense effort and dedication required to attain her current level of mastery, consequently underestimating her relative intellectual advantage over the average individual. This can foster a perception of her expertise as less exceptional than its reality. The most insidious aspect of these biases is their inherent resistance to self-detection. They render the recognition of their own influence an almost insurmountable challenge, akin to attempting to perceive one's own eyes without a reflective surface. Observe the hindsight bias, often colloquially termed the I knew it all along phenomenon. Post-event, we tend to believe we foresaw the outcome even when our prior uncertainty was palpable. This obstructs the vital process of learning from mistakes, as we distort our recollection of initial apprehension. If an investment falters, we might declare, I should have anticipated this, despite harboring considerable optimism at the outset. This bias actively undermines our capacity to acknowledge past misjudgments. Furthermore, the illusion of explanatory depth perpetuates the belief that our understanding of a subject far exceeds its actual scope. You might feel you grasp the mechanics of an automobile engine, yet upon being pressed for a step-by-step explanation, you would likely falter after delineating a few rudimentary components. This illusion cultivates an inflated sense of knowledge, serving as a primary impediment to recognizing our own ignorance. The very conviction of understanding obviates the necessity for deeper inquiry or self-examination. These biases establish a self-perpetuating cycle. We are predisposed to believe we possess greater knowledge than we do, and these same biases effectively shield us from perceiving this very predisposition. It is a subtle yet formidable snare. This is precisely why mere awareness of the Dunning-Kruger effect is insufficient to extricate oneself from its influence. Biases are intrinsically interwoven into the fabric of our cognitive processes, operating beneath the threshold of conscious control, shaping our judgments with an unseen hand. Therefore, how do these cognitive biases directly contribute to the inflated self-assessment prevalent among the less skilled? They achieve this by actively distorting the process of self-evaluation. The availability heuristic, for instance, amplifies the perceived significance of information that is readily accessible. A few positive experiences or a handful of compliments regarding a skill can be easily recalled, leading to an overestimation of overall ability, while numerous instances of struggle or failure are relegated to the periphery. Confirmation bias then intervenes, prompting a selective search for and heightened attention to information corroborating this favorable self-image, while actively dismissing contradictory evidence. The better-than-average effect and the fundamental attribution error further solidify this inflated self-regard, rendering the recognition of one's own incompetence virtually impossible. Individuals are, quite literally, biased towards believing they are more capable than they are, and their limited knowledge prevents them from discerning the flaws in their reasoning. Conversely, how do distinct biases illuminate the tendency for highly competent individuals to underestimate their relative abilities? The curse of knowledge stands as a paramount example. An expert's profound comprehension renders complex tasks seemingly effortless, leading them to surmise that others find them equally facile. This fosters an underestimation of the singularity of their skill set. The false consensus effect also plays a role, fostering the belief that others share their level of expertise or understanding, thereby diminishing their sense of individual accomplishment. They may also possess a keener awareness of the vastness of their field and the enduring frontiers of the unknown, a characteristic that, paradoxically, can engender a more humble, though sometimes underestimated, self-assessment of their current standing. Their understanding of the immensity of what remains to be learned can temper their perception of their own achievements. The fundamental impediment to leveraging knowledge of cognitive biases to surmount them lies in their very essence. They are largely unconscious and automatic. We can acquire knowledge about confirmation bias, yet our minds will still instinctively gravitate towards confirming evidence. We can read about hindsight bias, yet we will still experience the palpable sensation of "I knew it all along" in the wake of an event. This challenge is directly entwined with the core predicament of the Dunning-Kruger effect, as the effect itself is a manifestation of these unconscious biases. To transcend the Dunning-Kruger effect, we must cultivate intellectual humility, the profound understanding that our knowledge and beliefs are inherently circumscribed. However, these very biases conspire to obscure these limitations. It is akin to attempting to repair a malfunctioning steering wheel while the vehicle is careening off course. The very instrument required for rectification is itself implicated in the problem. These cognitive biases function as invisible architects of our self-perception, subtly molding our understanding of our own knowledge and proficiencies. Yet, the Dunning-Kruger effect transcends the aggregation of individual biases. It encompasses the intricate interplay of these biases with the very nature of knowledge itself. To truly apprehend why we succumb to either unwarranted confidence or undue doubt, we must next embark on an exploration of the landscape of what we know and, more crucially, what we do not. 3. The limits of our knowledge. It is a peculiar phenomenon, is it not? We often equate increased learning with a commensurate rise in certainty. Knowledge, we envision, is a meticulously ordered edifice of facts, and as we add to its structure, it grows taller, more robust, more complete. Yet, the reality, as we are beginning to discern, is far more labyrinthine. True comprehension does not invariably culminate in an unshakable conviction of absolute certainty. Indeed, on occasion, the inverse holds true. Consider, for a moment, the act of learning to drive. In those nascent stages, with a patient mentor by your side, the realm of automotive operation appears vast and somewhat intimidating. Your attention is a laser, fixed upon every minute detail, the vigilant scanning of mirrors, the deliberate signaling, the precise steering, the measured braking. You are acutely cognizant of the sheer volume of what you do not comprehend. A certain awkwardness, a pervasive uncertainty, may afflict you. This, paradoxically, is a propitious position to occupy, even if it feels anything but. It is a state of receptivity, fertile ground for acquisition. Now, picture an individual who has navigated the roads for a mere handful of weeks, perhaps confined to the familiar arteries of their neighborhood. They have successfully traversed from point A to point B without significant incident. They have absorbed the fundamental regulations, they possess the dexterity to start and stop the engine, and they can chart a course through a few well-trodden paths. In their estimation, they have learned to drive. Because their experiential tapestry is narrow, and their understanding is confined within this circumscribed sphere, a potent sense of self-assurance may begin to take root. They might think, driving is not so arduous after all. I have mastered it. They are aware of their existing knowledge, yet utterly oblivious to the boundless ocean of driving acumen that lies beyond their nascent glimpse. They remain ignorant of advanced defensive maneuvering, the nuanced art of anticipating fellow motorists' intentions, the physics of vehicular skidding, or the optimal strategies for confronting extreme meteorological conditions. Their knowledge is a solitary islet, and they mistakenly perceive it as the entire continent. Herein lies the germination of the illusion of comprehensive knowledge. This very illusion constitutes an intrinsic facet of our cognitive architecture, particularly during the initial phases of engagement with any new discipline. When one embarks upon a new endeavor, be it culinary arts, musical proficiency, or the assimilation of a complex scientific tenet, one is equipped with a rudimentary set of instruments. The tools at one's disposal are all that can be perceived, and it is facile to erroneously conclude that these constitute the entirety of existence. Because the extent of one's ignorance remains unseen, the full magnitude of what lies beyond the horizon of one's awareness is utterly inconceivable. One's own lack of knowledge becomes an invisible void. This is precisely the fertile milieu in which unwarranted confidence can flourish. A sense of significant accomplishment may arise simply from having mastered the initial, rudimentary steps encountered. The proficiencies that appear Herculean to you are, in fact, the sole ones that have registered within your awareness. Let us consider another commonplace illustration, the principles of firearm safety. An individual who has handled a weapon on only one or two occasions, perhaps within the controlled environment of a supervised shooting range, may feel they have grasped the fundamentals. They comprehend the imperative of directing the muzzle in a safe trajectory and refraining from engaging the trigger until prepared. However, they may be entirely unacquainted with the intricate safety mechanisms, the protocols for proper cleaning and maintenance, the ballistic properties of diverse ammunition types, or the subtle yet critical distinctions in the handling of various firearms. If queried about their expertise in firearm safety, they might assign themselves a rather high self-assessment. They are privy to the few directives they have received, and this feels commensurate with the totality of the subject. They are unaware of the manifold strata of knowledge and responsibility that an experienced and conscientious firearm owner possesses. Their circumscribed understanding engenders a fallacious sensation of complete mastery. This phenomenon is not indicative of deliberate disingenuousness or hubris. It is a cognitive peculiarity, a cerebral artifice. The very faculties requisite for achieving competence in a given domain are frequently the selfsame faculties necessary to recognize competence or its absence within oneself. If one is unacquainted with the rules of chess, one cannot truly ascertain whether one's moves are sagacious or disastrous. A maneuver that appears brilliant may, in reality, be a calamitous error that precipitates swift defeat. The framework for appraising one's own performance is absent. It is at this juncture that the Dunning-Kruger effect truly manifests. At the nadir of competence, individuals not only falter in executing a task, but are also fundamentally incapable of acknowledging their own subpar execution. They find themselves upon what might be termed Mount Stupid, an eminence of unmerited assurance. They have ascended just high enough to glimpse a small, familiar vista, which they erroneously perceive as the entirety of the world. They possess a limited repertoire of knowns, and they remain blissfully oblivious to the immense expanse of unknowns that envelop them. Their knowledge is akin to a diminutive spotlight in a cavernous, darkened chamber. It illuminates a constricted circle, and they extrapolate from this to assume it represents all that exists. However, here is where the narrative truly deepens. As our pursuit of knowledge continues, as we ascend the slopes of expertise, a remarkable transformation occurs. Our perspective undergoes a profound alteration. That diminutive islet of knowledge, once mistaken for a continent, begins to reveal its periphery. We commence to perceive the vast oceanic expanse that encircles it. We encounter novel concepts, unforeseen complexities, and subtle distinctions that we had never previously conceived. Revisit, for a moment, our driving analogy. After months or years of navigating the roads, you have traversed bustling highways, contended with unforeseen detours, and perhaps even piloted your vehicle through snow or torrential rain. You have come to appreciate the significance of maintaining a safe following distance, the procedure for an emergency stop, and the subtle indicators that suggest another driver may be on the verge of an error. Now, when you contemplate driving, your thoughts extend beyond the mere act of reaching your destination. You consider the myriad variables, the latent perils, the weight of the responsibility you bear. You become acutely aware of the immeasurable scope of what remains to be learned, the multitude of scenarios you have yet to encounter, and the boundless potential for refinement. Your horizon of doubt has dramatically expanded. This expanding horizon of doubt is not an emblem of deficiency or a regression. Quite the contrary. It is a profound testament to intellectual maturation. It signifies that you are genuinely commencing to apprehend the depth and intricacy of the subject matter. The more you assimilate, the more acutely you realize the extent of your own ignorance. This is not a disheartening revelation, it is an empowering one. It is the definitive characteristic of authentic expertise. The accomplished driver, unlike the neophyte, does not merely know how to operate a vehicle, they comprehend the art of driving, the science of driving, and the ever-present potential for the unexpected. Their knowledge has burgeoned, but with that growth comes a heightened appreciation for the immensity of what remains unknown. This is the paradox of mastery. As competence escalates, confidence frequently recedes, or at the very least, becomes more tempered. The expert is no longer perched upon Mount Stupid. They may occupy a valley, or perhaps find themselves upon the inclines of a far more formidable mountain range, acutely aware of the towering summits that still lie ahead. They grasp that their current understanding represents but a fraction of what could be known. Their knowledge has evolved into a more expansive spotlight, illuminating a wider circumference, yet they are now also privy to the immense darkness that surrounds it. They are cognizant of the known unknowns, those elements they are aware they do not know. To facilitate a more profound comprehension of this phenomenon, psychologists often delineate our knowledge into 4 distinct categories. It is akin to a cartographic representation of our awareness of what we know and what we do not know, and the degree to which we are conscious of our own ignorance. First, we encounter the known knowns. These are the truths we possess, and we are aware that we possess them. For instance, you are aware of your own appellation. You understand that the sky typically presents a cerulean hue during daylight hours. You recognize that 2 plus 2 yields 4. These are the established facts and proficiencies firmly embedded within your consciousness, and of these, you are assured. Second, we have the known unknowns. These represent the entities of which we are cognizant that we do not know. You may not be privy to the capital of Kyrgyzstan, yet you are aware that such a capital exists and its identity eludes you. You might lack the expertise to perform intricate neurosurgery, and you are conscious of this deficiency in your skill set. This category is indispensable for the acquisition of knowledge. Acknowledging one's ignorance is the foundational step toward rectifying it. Third, we discover the unknown knowns. This category is somewhat unconventional. It refers to knowledge that resides within you, but has been forgotten, or has become so deeply ingrained that you no longer consciously recognize it as knowledge. Consider the act of respiration. You possess the knowledge of how to breathe. You engage in it incessantly, yet you do not actively contemplate its physiological mechanics. It is an automatic process. This form of knowledge is frequently subliminal. For an expert, a significant portion of their proficiency falls into this classification. What appears insurmountably complex to a novice may be so instinctual for an expert that they scarcely give it a second thought. They might even overlook the fact that others do not possess this automatic comprehension. Finally, and perhaps most dauntingly, we confront the unknown unknowns. These are the phenomena that elude our knowledge, and we are not even aware of our lack of awareness regarding them. These are the blind spots, the vast and concealed domains of ignorance that we have not yet begun to conceptualize. For the novice driver, the notion of advanced accident avoidance techniques might constitute an unknown unknown. They are unaware of the existence of these techniques, rendering them incapable of even contemplating their acquisition. The Dunning-Kruger effect, particularly the overconfidence exhibited by those with limited competence, stems largely from a miscalculation within the first two categories, especially the known unknowns. Individuals possessing a low degree of competence frequently fail to recognize their known unknowns. They are unaware of the extent of their ignorance. Their restricted knowledge base does not furnish them with the requisite tools to apprehend the vastness of what they are missing. They may also misattribute their known knowns as constituting a disproportionately larger segment of the total knowledge than is veridical. They perceive their circumscribed sphere of understanding and erroneously infer it to be the entirety of existence. Conversely, experts are significantly more attuned to their known unknowns and are increasingly cognizant of the potential for unknown unknowns. Their extensive knowledge base empowers them to perceive the boundaries of their comprehension and to appreciate the complexity that lies beyond. They understand that the more they learn, the more questions invariably arise. They are aware of the intricate details, the subtle exceptions to established rules, and the multiplicity of perspectives that coexist. This awareness naturally precipitates a more circumspect and humble appraisal of their own expertise. They do not boast of their knowledge. Rather, they are frequently acutely conscious of the journey that still lies ahead. They recognize that their known knowns, while substantial, are merely components of a far grander intellectual landscape. This leads to a compelling paradox. The very proficiencies that render an individual competent also render it more challenging for them to accurately gauge their own competence in relation to others. An expert pianist, for instance, has cultivated an extraordinary degree of subconscious skill. Their digits move with a fluidity and precision that appears almost preternatural to a novice. This expertise has become so automatic, so deeply ingrained, that it feels effortless and natural to them. They may forget that for someone who has never previously encountered a piano, the mastery of even the most rudimentary scales represents an immense undertaking. They might unconsciously presume that others grasp concepts with the same celerity as they do, or that the effort involved in mastering a musical composition is considerably less than it actually is. They operate with a vast repository of unknown knowns knowledge, so profoundly embedded that it is no longer consciously acknowledged. Consequently, experts may, at times, underestimate their own relative abilities. They might execute a task with exceptional proficiency and assume that others found it equally facile. They are also more prone to acknowledging the unknown unknowns, the realms of music theory, composition, or performance practice that they have yet to explore. This awareness of what lies beyond their current purview contributes to their humility. They do not exult in their knowledge. Instead, they are often acutely mindful of the ongoing journey. They possess a more extended horizon of doubt, a more expansive perspective on the immensity of what remains to be learned. Thus, how does the absence of knowledge within a specific domain inherently preclude an individual from accurately assessing their own ignorance within that domain? It is analogous to attempting to discern a flavor one has never encountered. If one has tasted only saccharine substances, one cannot truly comprehend the meaning of bitter. The reference point is absent. Similarly, if one possesses scant knowledge concerning a subject, one lacks the framework to 4. Self-awareness and its challenges. The journey of self-discovery, encompassing our knowledge and capabilities, is seldom a straightforward expedition. We may harbor the illusion of knowing ourselves intimately, akin to the familiarity of our own abode. Yet, when it comes to the acuity of our skills and the depth of our understanding, our internal compass can betray us with startling inaccuracy. This is the intricate terrain of self-awareness, a landscape profoundly illuminated by the Dunning-Kruger effect. At its core, this phenomenon presents a perplexing paradox. The very deficiencies that render an individual incompetent in a given domain also blind them to their own inadequacy. Consider the futile attempts to appraise a culinary masterpiece without possessing the fundamental skills of a chef. One might lack the discernment for nuanced seasoning or the ability to ascertain perfect doneness, thus being utterly unqualified to judge the dish. Similarly, when knowledge or skill is wanting, so too are the very instruments required to perceive the extent of one's shortcomings. In essence, they are rendered oblivious to their own limitations. This is not a matter of intentional deception, but rather an inherent chasm in their capacity for self-assessment. Reflect upon the requisites for virtuosity in playing a musical instrument. Proficiency demands an understanding of rhythm, melody, harmony, and the manual dexterity to execute notes flawlessly. However, to perceive the quality of one's performance necessitates an even more refined faculty, an ear for pitch, an appreciation for musical phrasing, and the capacity to benchmark one's playing against professional standards. If even a simple scale is mangled, the player likely lacks the discerning ear or theoretical grounding to recognize the gravity of these errors. They might mistakenly believe their rendition is adequate, simply because they lack the framework to detect what is amiss. The skills essential for proficient execution are often inextricably linked to the skills requisite for accurate self-evaluation. When these foundational aptitudes are absent, so too is the ability for precise self-appraisal. It is akin to attempting to measure the altitude of a mountain with a ruler too short to reach its summit. This deficit in recognizing one's own fallibility can be termed a blind spot in self-awareness. For those ensnared by the Dunning-Kruger effect, this blind spot is particularly pronounced in their areas of weakness. They may exist in a state of blissful ignorance regarding the vast expanse of knowledge that lies beyond their circumscribed understanding. To them, the subject matter may appear manageable and limited, for their awareness is confined to what they know, and they remain unaware of the immensity of their ignorance. They acknowledge their known knowns, the truths they confidently grasp, and perhaps a few known unknowns, those areas they concede are beyond their ken. However, they are often utterly oblivious to the boundless realm of unknown unknowns, the intricate complexities and subtle nuances of the subject that they have not yet encountered, let alone comprehended. This leads us to the concept of the horizon of doubt. For an individual with scant knowledge, this horizon is remarkably narrow. They perceive a small sphere of comprehension, with everything beyond dissolving into an indistinct blur. Their confidence stems from an inability to apprehend the sheer volume of what remains to be learned. Conversely, as knowledge and expertise accrue, so too does the circumference of understanding expand. And with this expansion comes an amplified awareness of the vastness that lies beyond. Their horizon of doubt stretches, revealing an immense panorama of unresolved questions and intricate details. True experts, therefore, often exhibit a profound sense of humility, not due to diminished capability, but because their expanded knowledge has unveiled the sheer immensity of the unexplored. They comprehend that their current understanding represents merely a tiny islet in a boundless ocean of the unknown. This is not solely an intellectual quandary, it is deeply intertwined with our sense of self, our ego. The admission of ignorance or error can feel profoundly threatening, challenging the very edifice of our perceived identity. If an individual considers themselves intelligent, capable, or knowledgeable, encountering evidence to the contrary can be deeply unsettling. Our deeply held beliefs are often woven into the very fabric of our identity. When these beliefs are challenged, particularly those that bolster our self-esteem, we may react defensively. Rather than embracing new information, we might actively reject it, contrive justifications for its dismissal, or even resort to anger. This is why simply pointing out an individual's mistakes is often counterproductive. It can entrench them further in their defensiveness. To protect their ego, their self-perception, potentially inflated by a deficit in competence, becomes a fiercely guarded bastion. This is where the illusion of expertise takes root. In our contemporary era, acquiring a superficial grasp of a subject has become remarkably facile. A handful of video viewings, a few article readings, or participation in online discourse can foster an unwarranted sense of mastery. This illusion is often amplified by the ease with which external validation can be procured. A fleeting like or an approving comment can be misconstrued as genuine endorsement, reinforcing an inflated sense of competence. However, this external affirmation rarely mirrors the intricate, often messy, reality of true mastery. An individual might receive a deluge of positive feedback on a social media post concerning a nascent hobby, leading them to believe they are quite accomplished. Yet, they may remain utterly unaware of the sophisticated techniques, the historical context, or the subtle nuances that seasoned practitioners intuitively comprehend. The ready availability of such superficial praise can serve as a formidable impediment to cultivating the accurate self-awareness that arises from confronting genuine challenges and receiving candid, constructive critique. It fosters a comfortable echo chamber where doubt seldom finds purchase. The challenge of self-awareness, therefore, is intrinsically multifaceted. It transcends a mere lack of information. It encompasses the cognitive tools necessary to process that information, the emotional fortitude to accept feedback, and the humility to acknowledge the vastness of our ignorance. When competence is wanting, we not only perform poorly, but also lose the capacity to recognize that poor performance. This perpetuates a cycle of overconfidence, sustained not by genuine skill, but by an inability to perceive the truth. Consider the nascent days of aviation. Imagine a cohort of ardent individuals, perhaps possessing a modicum of mechanical aptitude, but lacking formal training in aerodynamics or engineering. They might have surveyed early flying contraptions and mused, "This appears rather uncomplicated. I wager I could pilot that." Their limited understanding of the forces at play, the inherent fragility of the materials, and the profound peril of uncontrolled flight prevented them from accurately assessing the risks or their own lack of preparedness. They may have been brimming with confidence, eager to ascend. Yet, history attests that this early epoch was fraught with frequent crashes and fatalities. Those who exuded the greatest confidence were often the most imperiled, precisely because they failed to grasp the immense complexity and danger. They were unaware of the vast constellation of unknown unknowns within the realm of flight. Contrast this with the meticulous methodology of pioneers such as the Wright brothers. While they undoubtedly experienced moments of optimism and resolve, their endeavor was characterized by painstaking experimentation, scrupulous observation, and a profound respect for the inherent challenges. They dedicated years to studying avian flight, constructing gliders, and rigorously testing their designs. They were acutely cognizant of the forces they sought to master and the potential for catastrophic failure. Their burgeoning knowledge did not lead them to believe they possessed all the answers. Rather, it unveiled further questions and greater complexities. This heightened awareness of the unknown, this horizon of doubt, stands as a hallmark of genuine expertise. It is not an indicator of timidity or fear, but of a profound comprehension of the subject's true scope. They understood that true mastery demanded not merely the construction of a flying machine, but an understanding of the very principles that enabled flight, and they possessed the humility to recognize this as a monumental undertaking. This is where the concept of intellectual humility assumes paramount importance. Intellectual humility, as we apprehend it, signifies a deep-seated recognition that our knowledge and beliefs are not immutable absolutes. It is the comprehension that our understanding is inherently limited and that our convictions may harbor flaws. It entails a genuine appreciation for the sheer immensity of what remains undiscovered. For an individual ensnared by the Dunning-Kruger effect, this is an arduous destination. Their lack of competence obscures their own limitations, and their ego may resist any information that challenges their inflated self-regard. They are so distant from the horizon of doubt that its very existence remains unseen. The Dunning-Kruger effect, therefore, demonstrates that self-awareness is not a passive state, but an active, continuous process. It compels us to perpetually scrutinize our assumptions, to actively seek out novel information, and to embrace the willingness to admit fallibility. It demands the cultivation of metacognitive skills, not merely for task execution, but for objective performance evaluation. This involves learning to discern the indicators of our own ignorance, to comprehend the boundaries of our knowledge, and to remain receptive to the possibility that our current beliefs may prove inaccurate. Consider an individual who presumes to be an authority on a particular historical period after perusing a few widely circulated books. They might confidently expound on events and personages, assured in their comprehension. However, a genuine historian, having dedicated years to poring over primary sources, understanding divergent interpretations, and recognizing the inherent complexities and ambiguities of the past, might approach the same subject with a far more circumspect and nuanced perspective. They might remark, "This is a captivating era, yet it is profoundly intricate, and myriad interpretations exist. We still have a vast amount to learn." This is not an absence of confidence. It is the consequence of their deep immersion in the subject, which has unveiled the sheer magnitude of the unknown. Their expanded sphere of knowledge has brought with it a significantly broader horizon of doubt. The psychological defense mechanisms we unconsciously employ constitute formidable barriers to this caliber of self-awareness. Confirmation bias, for instance, represents our innate tendency to seek and interpret information that corroborates our existing beliefs, while simultaneously disregarding or minimizing anything that contradicts them. If an individual believes themselves to be an exceptional cook, they might selectively focus on compliments received and dismiss any criticism as emanating from palates lacking refinement. This bias actively undermines objective self-assessment. Similarly, the innate desire to maintain a positive self-image can lead us to rationalize our errors or attribute them to external factors rather than acknowledging our own shortcomings. The illusion of expertise is further exacerbated by the ease with which information and opinions can be accessed online. A cursory search can yield an abundance of data, but it does not inherently confer the wisdom to discern accuracy, relevance, or true significance. The sheer volume of information can be overwhelming, and in the absence of underlying critical processing skills, we can readily fall prey to the delusion of possessing greater knowledge than we actually do. This is particularly pertinent when we encounter opinions that align with our pre-existing viewpoints, thereby fostering a spurious sense of consensus and expertise. So, how does one commence the process of surmounting these obstacles? The initial step, as with any endeavor of consequence, is recognition. We must acknowledge the Dunning-Kruger effect as a genuine phenomenon, to which we are all susceptible. We need to grasp that the very deficiency in knowledge that fosters overconfidence also renders us incapable of recognizing that overconfidence. This is a difficult truth to internalize, yet it forms the bedrock upon which genuine self-awareness is constructed. The cultivation of intellectual humility is not about succumbing to pessimism or perpetual self-doubt. Rather, it involves fostering a realistic appraisal of our capabilities and limitations. It is about recognizing that learning is a lifelong pursuit and that there will invariably be more to discover. It entails an openness to new ideas, even when they challenge our deeply ingrained convictions. It is about understanding that true expertise is often accompanied by a healthy measure of uncertainty, a recognition of the complexities that lie beyond our current grasp. Envision it thus. Imagine embarking on the navigation of a vast, uncharted territory. Initially, you might feel bold and assured, believing you can find your way with ease. However, as you venture further, you begin to encounter unforeseen impediments, bewildering pathways, and regions entirely unknown to you. Your initial confidence may begin to wane, supplanted by a more cautious and respectful approach. You realize that to truly navigate this terrain, you require more than a general sense of direction. You need detail. Chapter 2. Overcoming Doubt and Embracing Humility. 1. Changing Beliefs and Identity. Our convictions are far more than mere mental assent. They are the bedrock upon which our entire worldview is constructed. These foundations are inextricably bound to our very sense of self. Consider your allegiance to a sports team, your political leanings, or your definition of a true friend. These are not arbitrary notions. They are often woven into the fabric of our identity. When these beliefs are challenged, the experience can feel less like an intellectual disagreement and more like a personal assault. This vulnerability is amplified when we have not thoroughly examined the genesis of our own convictions. The Dunning-Kruger effect intrudes insidiously here. Individuals possessing scant knowledge of a subject may be utterly oblivious to the vast expanse of their ignorance. Lacking the framework to perceive what remains unknown, they cannot conceive that their own beliefs might be incomplete or erroneous. Their circumscribed understanding masquerades as comprehensive mastery. This illusory certainty compels them to cling more tenaciously to their convictions, as altering them would necessitate an admission of error, a perceived threat to their self-concept as knowledgeable individuals. They are anchored to their beliefs, and their deficit in self-awareness, a hallmark of the Dunning-Kruger effect, precludes even the contemplation that their anchor might be unsound. Picture a person who fancies themselves a culinary virtuoso, yet their repertoire extends only to toasting bread. If you suggest their toast is scorched, they might react defensively. Scorched? This is perfectly browned. They might retort. They lack the discernment to recognize the subtle signs of overcooking, or the nuanced understanding of varying levels of doneness that a genuine chef would possess. Their identity as a chef rests on an exceedingly precarious foundation, and they will defend their perfect toast with fierce conviction, for admitting its imperfection would shatter their self-perception. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. Low competence breeds high confidence, which then serves as an impenetrable shield against any information that might destabilize their self-image. We are remarkably adept at safeguarding our beliefs, often with an unconscious efficiency. It is as though an innate defensive mechanism, a form of belief ninjutsu, is activated when our deeply ingrained ideas are questioned. This is not necessarily an act of malice, but rather a cognitive strategy aimed at preserving internal coherence and stability. When novel information collides with our existing framework, our minds can deploy a variety of ingenious stratagems to preserve the status quo. A prevalent tactic is the dismissal of the information source. We might rationalize that person knows nothing, or they have an ulterior motive. Even with a reputable source, we may find grounds to question their credibility or understanding. Another strategy involves the distortion of the evidence itself. We might seize upon minute details that seem to corroborate our existing viewpoint, or identify exceptions to a new principle, thereby overlooking the overarching pattern. It is akin to examining a single puzzle piece and claiming to have grasped the entire image. At times, we simply shift the parameters of what constitutes proof. If confronted with compelling counter-evidence, we might subtly redefine our criteria for validation. We might concede, perhaps that holds true in certain contexts, but my personal experience differs. Individual experience can become a formidable bulwark, even when it is demonstrably limited. In my experience, we might declare, individuals who hold belief X are invariably mistaken, conveniently forgetting that our own reality represents but a fractional segment of the broader truth. And of course, the pervasive influence of confirmation bias is ever present. We actively seek out information that validates our pre-existing notions, while tending to disregard or minimize any data that contradicts them. It is as if our minds are equipped with a filter that selectively permits confirmatory information to pass while blocking dissenting views. These ninjutsu maneuvers are particularly potent for those ensnared by the Dunning-Kruger effect. Their overconfidence, coupled with an unawareness of their own limitations, leads them to perceive themselves as the discerning arbiters capable of identifying flawed arguments or biased perspectives. They believe they possess the genuine insight into the matter, and anyone presenting opposing information must therefore be misguided, prejudiced, or simply wrong. They wield their perceived expertise as a weapon, employing these defensive mechanisms to effortlessly deflect any challenge, seeing themselves as sagacious guardians of truth rather than individuals obstinately clinging to fallacious notions. The paradox of self-awareness presents a significant impediment. The very cognitive biases that foster overconfidence, such as the Dunning-Kruger effect, simultaneously render individuals profoundly resistant to recognizing their own need for recalibration. To acknowledge the necessity of altering one's beliefs, one must first possess the capacity to perceive that current convictions may be flawed or incomplete. This requires a degree of introspection and an appreciation for the inherent complexities of a given subject. Yet, the Dunning-Kruger effect is precisely characterized by a deficit in this very self-awareness. The less one knows, the more assured they feel, and the less inclined they are to entertain the possibility of error. It is akin to attempting to locate a blind spot in one's own visual field. One cannot perceive their blind spot because, by its very definition, it is imperceptible. Similarly, one cannot readily identify their own cognitive biases or their own lack of knowledge as the very instruments required. For such identification, their knowledge base and critical faculties are precisely what are wanting. This engenders a pernicious cycle. One feels confident and correct precisely because they are oblivious to their own missteps. They are blind to their own blindness. Consider an individual who has embarked on learning a new skill, such as playing the guitar. They might master 3 rudimentary chords and immediately feel poised for a public performance. They have yet to grasp the vastness of music theory, the intricacies of chord progressions, or advanced techniques. Because they are unaware of these complexities, a surge of confidence ensues. They might even presume to offer guidance to seasoned musicians. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect in full display. Their limited knowledge, coupled with their inability to perceive the immense scope of their ignorance, results in an inflated estimation of their own capabilities. They are so convinced of their nascent proficiency that they remain impervious to any feedback suggesting a need for further learning. The key to extricating oneself from this cycle and achieving genuine belief transformation lies in the embrace of doubt. For too long, doubt has been misconstrued as a mark of weakness, a failure of resolve. But what if we reframed this perception? What if we viewed doubt not as an adversary, but as an ally, a gateway to intellectual expansion? When we are steeped in certainty, we become closed off. Our minds are made up, and new information struggles to penetrate. It is akin to a sealed door. Doubt, however, acts as a key. When we permit ourselves to doubt, we unlock that door. Doubt signifies an awareness of complexity and understanding that the narrative may be more intricate than initially conceived. It does not necessitate the wholesale abandonment of our convictions, but rather a willingness to examine them with fresh eyes, to consider divergent perspectives, and to remain open to the possibility of being mistaken. This is where the concept of intellectual humility emerges as profoundly significant. Intellectual humility is the recognition that our knowledge and beliefs are inherently bounded and potentially fallible. It entails acknowledging the vastness of what remains unknown and maintaining an openness to novel information and alternative viewpoints. It stands in stark opposition to the overconfidence characteristic of the Dunning-Kruger effect. True experts, those who have dedicated themselves assiduously to a field, often exhibit a profound sense of intellectual humility. Their depth of knowledge renders them acutely aware of the ceaseless expanse of what remains to be learned. Their horizon of doubt, the demarcation between what they know and what they do not, is expansive. This is not an indicator of inadequacy, but rather a testament to wisdom. It signifies a continuous process of learning, questioning, and refining one's understanding. They are not reticent to articulate, "I do not know," or "I must investigate this further." For an individual deeply entrenched in a belief, particularly one intertwined with their identity, direct confrontation can be an arduous endeavor. Informing them they are incorrect, or presenting a deluge of contradictory facts, often proves counterproductive. They are likely to deploy their belief ninjutsu, deflecting your arguments and solidifying their existing stance. A more constructive approach, one that acknowledges the potency of identity and the efficacy of defensive mechanisms, involves the subtle sowing of seeds of doubt. This does not imply dishonesty or manipulation. Rather, it involves posing gentle, probing questions that encourage introspection. It entails fostering an environment where questioning is perceived as safe, and where admitting uncertainty is viewed as a strength, not a failing. For instance, instead of asserting your stance on that policy is wrong, one might inquire, what are some potential drawbacks to that approach? Or have you considered how an individual with a different perspective might view this issue? The objective is to facilitate the individual's nascent perception of fissures within their own certainty, not through coercion, but through a gentle invitation. It is about assisting them in expanding their own horizon of doubt so that they may commence questioning their own presuppositions. This process demands patience and a profound comprehension of the psychological barriers at play. It necessitates our recognition that altering deeply ingrained beliefs, especially those tied to identity, is not a linear or facile undertaking. Consider the analogy of a skilled gardener. A gardener does not simply thrust a seed into arid, compacted soil and anticipate growth. They prepare the ground, loosen the earth, and ensure it is adequately moist and fertile. Only then can the seed take root and begin to flourish. Similarly, before we can reasonably expect an individual to truly absorb new information or alter their beliefs, we must aid them in preparing the soil of their mind. This preparation involves cultivating intellectual humility, fostering a disposition toward questioning, and establishing a secure space for doubt to emerge. This internal transformation, this cultivation of intellectual humility and a willingness to embrace doubt, constitutes the essential initial phase. It is about creating the internal conditions conducive to growth. However, this marks merely the commencement of our endeavor. The subsequent, critical step involves understanding how to apply this nascent humility in our interactions with the world, particularly when navigating the intricate terrain of collective knowledge and divergent perspectives. 2. The role of humility in learning. The journey of learning is rarely a straight line, but rather a meandering path, punctuated by moments of incandescent clarity and stretches of disorienting fog. We may believe we have finally apprehended a concept only to encounter a new stratum of complexity that serves as a potent reminder of the vast expanse yet to be understood. It is in these instances that intellectual humility truly reveals its brilliance. This is not an exercise in self-diminishment or inadequacy. Rather, it is the cultivation of an honest appraisal that our accumulated knowledge, akin to a solitary island in an immeasurable ocean, possesses shores that inevitably meet the unknown. This humble acknowledgement is not an impediment to learning, but the very key that unlocks its boundless potential. When we approach a novel subject or a formidable idea imbued with intellectual humility, we are, in essence, opening a door. Envision yourself standing before such an entryway. If you are convinced you have already surveyed all that lies within, you will likely keep that door resolutely shut, perhaps even secured with a lock. You might cast a cursory glance, dismiss its contents outright, or presume to know what resides behind it without ever truly peering inside. This is the insidious work of overconfidence in the realm of our minds. It whispers, "You have this covered. You already possess sufficient understanding." In doing so, it erects an invisible barrier, preventing us from venturing into new territories of comprehension. Conversely, intellectual humility articulates, "While I may possess some knowledge, there is an immeasurable breadth of understanding that eludes me." This simple, unvarnished admission creates an inviting space for inquiry. It ignites our curiosity. We become more receptive to divergent viewpoints, more inclined to engage with texts that might challenge our current convictions, and more willing to pose questions that may seem elementary to others. This openness is paramount. Consider a novice cook who is adamantly convinced of their innate mastery. They might disdainfully bypass a recipe, trusting their intuition as inherently superior. They may disregard the counsel of a seasoned chef, believing their own understanding to be more refined. The consequence is a missed opportunity to absorb fundamental techniques, to grasp the scientific underpinnings of baking, or to discover flavor combinations that could elevate their culinary creations to new heights. Their portal to learning remains sealed by the edifice of their perceived expertise. Now, contemplate another individual, perhaps equally gifted, who approaches the art of cooking with a spirit of humility. They might articulate, "I find immense joy in cooking, and I have produced commendable dishes, yet I recognize that many chefs have dedicated their lives to this craft. I aspire to learn from their accumulated wisdom." This humble aspirant will eagerly devour cookbooks, observe culinary programs with an open mind, and welcome feedback even when it highlights an error. They do not shrink from admitting their inability to perfectly poach an egg or to strike that delicate equilibrium between sweet and savory. This willingness to acknowledge their lacunae is precisely what empowers them to fill those voids with accurate, invaluable knowledge. Their intellectual humility functions as a welcoming threshold, inviting new information and skills to permeate their understanding. This disposition stands as the direct counterpoint to the Dunning-Kruger effect. Recall how individuals with limited competence often overestimate their own abilities. Their very lack of knowledge renders them blind to their own deficiencies. They are unaware of what they do not know, and this ignorance breeds an unfounded confidence that slams the door shut on any avenue for growth. They eschew seeking feedback because they perceive no necessity for it. They dismiss new information because it fails to align with their already formed, albeit incomplete, conception of reality. Intellectual humility, in stark contrast, represents the deliberate act of choosing to keep that door ajar, even when we feel our knowledge is substantial. It is the proactive step of declaring, "Let me explore what else exists." Humility also serves as an indispensable compass for navigating the inevitable missteps inherent in our pursuit of knowledge. No one acquires understanding without encountering errors. It is an intrinsic facet of the process. Critical distinction lies in our response to these errors. If we are excessively self-assured, we may casually dismiss them, attribute them to external factors, or even deny their occurrence altogether. This prevents us from extracting any valuable lessons from the experience. Our compass is rendered inoperable, pointing us astray or failing to indicate any direction. An individual who embodies intellectual humility, however, perceives mistakes as instructive signposts. They comprehend that errors are not personal indictments, but rather valuable data points. They can articulate, "Very well, that approach proved unsuccessful. What can I glean from this?" It is through this willingness to scrutinize our missteps that genuine refinement takes root. Consider a scientist meticulously conducting an experiment. If the results deviate from their predictions, a humble scientist does not succumb to despair or abandon the investigation. Instead, they meticulously review their methodologies, their underlying assumptions, and their collected data. They pose the questions: where did my process falter? Was my hypothesis fundamentally flawed? Did I overlook a crucial variable? This careful, humble self-examination is the crucible in which breakthroughs are forged. They do not recoil from the horizon of doubt that emerges when outcomes diverge from expectations. They harness it to guide their subsequent actions. Picture the narrative of a young programmer, let us call her Anya, who is in the process of constructing her inaugural complex software application. She has invested considerable effort, and she holds the conviction that her code is nearly flawless. Yet, upon testing it, the application unexpectedly crashes. An approach dominated by overconfidence might prompt Anya to attribute the failure to the testing environment or to dismiss it as a minor glitch easily rectified without profound analysis. She might experience frustration, but she would likely refrain from fundamentally questioning the integrity of her own coding logic. Anya, imbued with humility, would, however, pause. She would acknowledge that her code, despite her diligent efforts, harbors a defect. She would not interpret this as a reflection of her worth as a programmer, but rather as an opportunity to evolve into a superior programmer. She would meticulously trace the execution of her code, line by line, endeavoring to pinpoint the precise locus of failure. She might consult online forums, peruse documentation she had previously bypassed, or even solicit assistance from a more experienced colleague, not out of desperation, but from a genuine yearning to comprehend the root cause. This humble methodology for error correction enables her not only to resolve the immediate bug, but also to deepen her understanding of programming principles, thereby enhancing her capacity to preempt similar issues in the future. The Dunning-Kruger effect, in this context, would have Anya believing herself to be an accomplished coder already, thus preventing her from perceiving the critical errors that a humble learner would actively seek out and learn from. Moreover, intellectual humility forms the foundational bedrock upon which a more profound understanding is constructed. Learning transcends mere rote memorization of facts or the acquisition of task-specific skills. It encompasses the comprehension of the interconnectedness of ideas, the grasp of underlying principles, and the appreciation of the subtle nuances that imbue a subject with richness and complexity. Superficial knowledge, often a hallmark of overconfidence, may convey a sense of completeness, yet it lacks true depth. It is analogous to knowing the name of a tree without comprehending its root system, its developmental cycle, or its ecological niche. Humility compels us to delve deeper. It prompts us to inquire why, rather than merely what. It instills a comfort with the notion that our current understanding may be incomplete or even erroneous. This readiness to revisit foundational concepts, to challenge our own assumptions, and to engage with perspectives that offer a more intricate view is what transmutes a compilation of disparate facts into genuine comprehension. It is about apprehending the why that underpins the what. Imagine learning about a pivotal historical event. An individual possessing superficial knowledge might commit to memory dates, names, and key outcomes. They might feel they have adequately learned the event. A humble learner, however, will extend their inquiry. They will pose questions such as, what were the prevailing social and economic conditions that precipitated this event? What were the diverse motivations of the individuals involved? How did this event shape subsequent historical trajectories? They will actively seek out a multiplicity of historical accounts, acknowledging that no single narrative can encapsulate the entirety of truth. This pursuit of deeper causal relationships, fueled by a humble recognition of inherent complexity, yields a far richer and more accurate understanding of the past. The overconfident individual may rest content with the surface-level grasp, while the humble learner continues to explore, understanding that the horizon of doubt in history, much like in science, is vast and endlessly fascinating. This persistent pursuit of deeper understanding stands in direct opposition to the stagnation that the Dunning-Kruger effect can engender. When an individual believes they have attained a level of expertise, they often cease their quest for new information or their critical examination of their own conclusions. They settle into a comfortable, albeit inaccurate, certainty. Humility, conversely, fuels a lifelong engagement with learning. It recognizes that the more we acquire knowledge, the more acutely aware we become of the immensity of what we do not know. This awareness is not a source of despair, but a potent impetus to continue exploring, questioning, and growing. Finally, intellectual humility functions as a protective shield, safeguarding us from the paralyzing apprehension of being incorrect or appearing ignorant. Within numerous social and professional contexts, there exists a subtle pressure to project an image of competence and assuredness. This pressure can render us hesitant to pose questions, to acknowledge confusion, or to undertake challenging tasks for fear of exposing our perceived inadequacies. This fear can precipitate intellectual stagnation, wherein we confine ourselves to our existing knowledge base, eschew risks, and forfeit opportunities for significant advancement. Humility liberates us from this pervasive fear. When we embrace intellectual humility, we understand that posing a question is not an indicator of weakness, but a testament to strength and a commitment to learning. Admitting our lack of knowledge is not an acknowledgement of failure, but an honest assessment that empowers us to seek the requisite understanding. This cultivates a growth mindset, wherein challenges are not perceived as threats to our ego, but as exhilarating opportunities to Expand our capabilities. Consider a team engaged in a complex project. If the team members harbor a fear of admitting their lack of comprehension regarding a particular aspect, the project is liable to falter. Assumptions may be made, critical details overlooked, and errors perpetuated without correction. This represents a classic scenario where overconfidence, masked by a fear of appearing less knowledgeable, can lead to detrimental outcomes. However, within a team that esteems intellectual humility, individuals feel secure in voicing their uncertainties. Someone might articulate, "I'm not entirely certain I grasp how this component integrates with the others. Would someone be willing to guide me through it once more?" This statement, born of humility, does not diminish their standing. It actually fortifies the team's collective understanding and its capacity for effective problem-solving. It facilitates collaborative learning, wherein each member contributes to a shared, accurate perception. The Dunning-Kruger effect, with its emphasis on spurious confidence, actively discourages such open dialogue, leading to isolated pockets of ignorance that can undermine the entire endeavor. Humility, in contrast, fosters an environment where learning is a shared, ongoing process, shielded from the debilitating grip of ego-driven apprehension. The active practice of articulating "I do not know" is not about reinforcing a sense of deficiency. It is about creating the fertile ground for genuine knowledge acquisition. When we acknowledge our ignorance, we are not dwelling on a deficit. Rather, we are identifying a specific domain where learning is imperative. This focused identification allows us to direct our efforts with precision. It is akin to a physician diagnosing a specific ailment. Knowing the precise nature of the affliction enables targeted treatment. If Anya, our programmer, merely felt a generalized sense of inadequacy, she might become demotivated. But by stating, "I do not know why my code is crashing at this particular point," she has established a clear objective. This prompts her to seek out specific solutions, to research particular error messages, or to consult documentation pertaining to the exact function she is employing. This process of identifying a knowledge gap and actively striving to bridge it is the very engine of learning. It transforms a vague sensation of not knowing into a concrete task of discovery, leading to verifiable knowledge and a tangible augmentation of competence. Intellectual humility also plays a pivotal role in our capacity to evaluate the credibility of information and the reliability of our own conclusions, particularly when confronted with conflicting evidence. In the contemporary landscape, we are inundated with information from an innumerable array of sources, many of which are imbued with bias or factual inaccuracies. A mind predisposed to overconfidence, already convinced of its own rectitude, will frequently seize upon information that corroborates its existing beliefs and dismiss anything that challenges them, irrespective of the source's credibility. It is akin to navigating with blinkers. A humble learner, however, approaches information with a critical yet open disposition. They understand that their initial assessment may be flawed. When confronted with conflicting evidence, they do not immediately repudiate one side. Instead, they pause and inquire, what are the origins of this information? What evidence is presented? Are there potential biases at play? They are more inclined to seek out multiple perspectives, to weigh the evidence with objectivity, and to be willing to revise their conclusions if the evidence warrants such a shift. This critical evaluation, driven by a humble recognition of their own fallibility, enables them to construct a more robust and accurate understanding rather than clinging to comforting falsehoods. To illustrate, consider the intricate and often contentious subject of 3. Online validation vs. real-world complexity. The digital ether hums with a cacophony of pronouncements. Across social media, within the digital forums, and even in the appended remarks of articles, voices ascend with an almost deafening assurance. It is facile to be swept into this current of conviction. A solitary individual declares with unshakable certainty a facile solution to an intricate predicament, and in a blink, hundreds, even thousands, align in accord. They bestow their likes, disseminate the pronouncement, and append their own resonant endorsements. This cultivates a potent sensation of rectitude, of belonging to a cohort possessing genuine perspicacity. It resembles an unbroken cascade of applause, reinforcing the notion that one has attained complete comprehension. This digital milieu, while fostering connection, can devolve into a fertile ground for hubris, particularly for those yet to cultivate a profound grasp of a subject. Algorithms frequently champion content that elicits potent reactions, and declarative statements, even when lacking complete veracity, tend to command greater attention. Consequently, an individual possessing scant knowledge may garner as much, if not more, positive reinforcement for their audacious assertions as one with years of accumulated experience. It is a system that, inadvertently, may recompense superficiality. Envision an individual articulating a rudimentary, perhaps even erroneous, perspective on a complex medical malady. If couched in absolute confidence and met with numerous endorsements and supportive commentary, they might begin to believe they have unearthed a profound verity. This positive reinforcement renders it exceedingly arduous for them to entertain the possibility of error, or to acknowledge the far greater intricacy of the actual situation. This is where the Dunning-Kruger effect truly flourishes. It finds fertile soil within these echo chambers, where superficial knowledge is mistaken for profound insight, and overconfidence is perpetually validated. Yet, stepping beyond the luminescent screen, the tangible world seldom proffers such facile resolutions. Existence is inherently amorphous, replete with gradations of ambiguity, and frequently, the repercussions of our actions carry a weight far exceeding a mere handful of dissenting remarks. Contemplate the construction of a bridge. One cannot simply decree a design based upon a prevailing online trend. There exist the immutable laws of physics, the principles of engineering, the intrinsic properties of materials, the specific geotechnical conditions, a labyrinth of interconnected variables demanding profound, meticulous deliberation. Should one underestimate the wind load or the soil's structural integrity, the bridge might not merely be flawed, it could succumb to catastrophic failure. The real world possesses an uncanny capacity to deliver feedback, often with formidable force, when our understanding proves deficient. Consider the realm of finance. An individual might peruse a smattering of online disquisitions, observe a few prominent voices extolling a particular stock or cryptocurrency, with unassailable conviction and resolve to commit their life's savings. They feel emboldened by the sheer volume of similar affirmations encountered online. However, the stock market is an entity of profound complexity, influenced by global exigencies, corporate performance, investor sentiment, and an innumerable array of unpredictable variables. When that investment falters and their entire fortune evaporates, the online validation offers no succor. The consequence in the material world is stark and acutely painful. This is not an exercise in undue pessimism. It is an acknowledgement that genuine mastery, the kind requisite for navigating the challenges of the tangible world, is forged not from strident pronouncements, but from a profound respect for complexity and a perpetual awareness of that which remains unknown. This incessant deluge of online affirmation can metamorphose into a perilous snare. It is gratifying to be in agreement, to be perceived as knowledgeable. Yet, if that accord emanates from individuals equally adrift in ignorance, or if it arises solely from the audacity of definitively articulating an opinion, it can impede our pursuit of challenging information that would genuinely deepen our understanding. Why expend effort on an arduous, research-laden tome or attend a complex seminar when a brief ego boost can be procured from a few hundred endorsements on a simplistic, confident missive? This sanctuary of comfort, constructed upon superficial validation, actively obstructs intellectual advancement. It renders us recalcitrant to feedback, particularly adverse commentary, as it imperils the meticulously crafted persona of competence we have erected online. To concede error or ignorance feels akin to regression when one's digital identity is predicated upon infallibility. This resistance to correction and novel information is a defining characteristic of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the very act of being validated for ignorance perpetuates the individual's entrapment within that state. True expertise, the kind capable of navigating the intricate tapestry of the real world, often presents a starkly different visage from the confident declarations prevalent online. Seasoned practitioners, individuals who have dedicated years, even decades, to grappling with their respective disciplines, typically embody a profound sense of intellectual humility. They comprehend that for every answer they possess, a dozen new inquiries invariably emerge. They exhibit reticence in formulating sweeping generalizations, having witnessed an abundance of exceptions, nuances, and unforeseen variables. When a seasoned physician elucidates a therapeutic regimen, they might discourse upon probabilities, potential adverse effects, and individual variations, rather than proffering a guaranteed panacea. This is not indicative of deficiency or a lack of knowledge. It is a testament to their profound comprehension of the subject's intricate fabric. This recognition of their own knowledge lacunae is not a failing, it is the very bedrock of their competence. Their confidence resides not in possessing all the answers, but in their capacity for continuous learning, adaptation, and the acknowledgement of venturing into uncharted territories. This represents the practical manifestation of intellectual humility, a quiet competence born from a deep reverence for the vast expanse of the unknown. Let us consider an illustrative scenario. Imagine two individuals engaged in a discourse on climate change. One, whom we shall name Alex, is exceptionally active online. He has perused a few articles that decry climate change as a fabrication, and he has become vociferous in his pronouncements. He disseminates memes, shares catchy yet misleading infographics, and participates in acrimonious debates, always with an air of absolute certainty. He garners a substantial number of endorsements from like-minded individuals, which fortifies his conviction that he is on the correct trajectory. He feels profoundly informed on the subject. Conversely, we have Dr. Lena Hansen, a climate scientist. She has dedicated 20 years to the study of atmospheric data, the operation of complex models, and collaborative endeavors with researchers globally. When she addresses climate change, her discourse encompasses trends, statistical significance, the inherent limitations of current models, and the ongoing scientific deliberation regarding the precise trajectory of future warming or the exact ramifications of specific policy interventions. She may express apprehension, but she exercises caution against making definitive predictions concerning specific meteorological events years hence. To an individual like Alex, accustomed to categorical pronouncements, Dr. Hansen might appear hesitant, perhaps even lacking in expertise. However, in reality, her circumspection and acknowledgement of complexity are precisely what elevate her to the status of an expert. Her confidence is rooted not in omniscience, but in her robust investigative methodology, her understanding of the scientific process, and her profound awareness of the vastness yet to be discovered. The digital realm frequently elevates individuals akin to Alex, furnishing them with an unceasing stream of validation that fuels their excessive confidence. This validation serves as a comforting embrace, fostering complacency within the shallow confines of knowledge. The tangible world, however, is an unfathomable ocean. To navigate its depths, one requires more than a stentorian voice and a confident demeanor. One needs the requisite skills, the profound knowledge, and, most critically, the humility to acknowledge the currents, the abyssal depths, and the potential perils. The more we pursue online affirmation for our opinions, the greater the risk of becoming like Alex, confidently adrift upon a sea of misinformation, incapable of discerning the approaching tempests. This is why intellectual humility is not merely an agreeable sentiment, it is an indispensable practical requirement. It stands as the antidote to the illusion of certainty that digital environments so readily propagate. It functions as the compass that guides us through the immensity of our own ignorance. When we embrace intellectual humility, we cease to perceive doubt as a weakness and begin to recognize it as a hallmark of intelligence, an indicator that we are poised for learning. We commence to grasp that true mastery is not predicated upon possessing all the answers, but upon possessing the fortitude to pose the pertinent questions, to seek out divergent perspectives, and to acknowledge when further learning is imperative. The siren call of immediate online affirmation can exert a formidable influence, offering a facile balm for our innate desire to feel knowledgeable and accepted. Yet, the ultimate measure of comprehension is not the vehemence with which we can proclaim our certainty, but the grace with which we can navigate the inevitable complexities and uncertainties that engagement with the real world presents. This journey necessitates a willingness to confront our own limitations, a process that commences with recognizing the deceptive allure of superficial validation and ultimately guides us toward a more profound and practical form of intellectual humility. 4. Recognizing and accepting limitations. The journey toward wisdom is rarely a straight line. It is more akin to navigating a vast, uncharted ocean. We often set sail with a confident belief in our charts and compass, only to discover that the sea is far larger and more complex than we ever imagined. This initial overestimation of our navigational skills is a familiar trap, one that the Dunning-Kruger effect vividly illustrates. At its heart, this effect highlights a curious paradox. The very lack of knowledge that leads us astray also blinds us to our own misdirection. Consider, for a moment, the intricate world of grammar. Imagine someone who has never formally studied its rules. They might string words together in a way that makes sense to them, perhaps even communicating basic ideas effectively. Yet, without understanding the underlying principles, the correct placement of verbs, the nuances of punctuation, the proper use of tenses, they are utterly incapable of recognizing their own grammatical errors. They simply do not possess the tools, the knowledge base, to identify the mistakes they are making. This is not a matter of stubbornness or a deliberate refusal to learn. It is a fundamental deficit in metacognition. Metacognition is our ability to think about our own thinking, to monitor our understanding, and to accurately assess our performance. When this capacity is underdeveloped, especially in a particular area, we lack the critical self-awareness needed to spot our own shortcomings. This is precisely why the Dunning-Kruger effect takes hold in individuals with low competence. They do not know enough to know what they do not know. Their limited understanding does not just prevent them from performing well, it actively shields them from realizing their poor performance. They are, in a sense, prisoners of their own ignorance, unable to see the bars of their cell. The practical consequences of this blindness are widespread. Think of a novice investor who, having read a few articles, believes they can outperform seasoned professionals. They might make impulsive decisions, ignore sound advice, and pour their savings into risky ventures, all while feeling supremely confident in their superior market insights. They cannot recognize the sophisticated analysis, the deep historical context, or the risk management strategies that experienced investors employ because they have not yet acquired the knowledge to appreciate their value or to see their own absence of them. The outcome is often financial loss, a harsh lesson learned only after the damage is done, and even then, the initial overconfidence can make it difficult to accept the true cause of the failure. This stands in stark contrast to the experience of true experts. For them, the growth of knowledge does not lead to a smug sense of certainty, but rather to an ever-expanding awareness of the unknown. It is a phenomenon I often describe using the metaphor of a circle of knowledge. Imagine your understanding of a subject as the area within a circle. As you learn more, the area of this circle grows. But as the area expands, so does its circumference, the boundary between what you know and what you do not know. Experts, having explored vast territories of their field, are acutely aware of this ever-growing circumference. They see the intricate connections, the subtle exceptions to rules, the countless avenues for further research, and the profound mysteries that still lie hidden. This heightened awareness of complexity and the sheer volume of what remains undiscovered is not a sign of doubt in their abilities, but a testament to their depth of understanding. The amateur, with their smaller circle of knowledge, has a much shorter circumference. Their horizon of doubt is narrow, their awareness of potential pitfalls minimal. They might grasp a few basic principles and feel they have mastered the subject, unaware of the vast landscape of nuance and complexity that lies just beyond their limited view. This difference is crucial. The expert's doubt is informed. It is a product of deep engagement and a sophisticated understanding of the subject's intricacies. The novice's certainty, on the other hand, is often a product of their very lack of engagement with those intricacies. To truly navigate this landscape, we must learn to distinguish between different kinds of unknowns. Philosophers and cognitive scientists often speak of known unknowns and unknown unknowns. Understanding this distinction is a cornerstone of intellectual humility. Known unknowns are those areas where we are aware of our gaps in knowledge. For example, a student studying history might know that they need to learn more about the economic factors that led to World War I. They recognize this gap, and this recognition is the first step toward filling it. This is fertile ground for learning. It is where we actively seek out information, ask questions, and engage in deliberate study. It is a state of conscious inquiry, a vital part of intellectual growth. However, the more challenging and, frankly, more dangerous territory lies in the realm of unknown unknowns. These are the things we do not even know we do not know. They are our blind spots, the assumptions we hold without question, the fundamental principles we have never considered, or the entire fields of knowledge that have not yet crossed our radar. The Dunning-Kruger effect thrives in this space. Because we are unaware of these unknowns, they can significantly influence our judgments and actions without us ever realizing it. How, then, can we actively try to uncover these hidden unknowns? It requires a deliberate and often uncomfortable posture of openness and curiosity. It means actively seeking out perspectives that challenge our own, not to necessarily adopt them, but to understand them. It involves engaging with ideas that seem strange or counterintuitive and asking ourselves, why might someone believe this? It means reading broadly, listening deeply, and being willing to entertain the possibility that our current understanding, however comfortable it may feel, is incomplete or even flawed. It is about recognizing that the world is a complex place and our individual perspective, no matter how well-intentioned, is inherently limited. This process of recognizing and accepting our limitations is not always easy. In fact, it can be emotionally quite difficult. For many, our sense of self is deeply intertwined with what we believe we know and can do. To admit that we are not as knowledgeable or as skilled as we thought can feel like a threat to our ego, our identity, or even our social standing. We might fear being seen as incompetent, foolish, or simply not good enough. This fear can lead us to unconsciously resist any information or experience that might expose our shortcomings. We might avoid situations where we are likely to be challenged, or we might quickly dismiss evidence that contradicts our deeply held beliefs. Societal pressures often exacerbate this, as we are frequently rewarded for displaying confidence, for appearing decisive and knowledgeable, rather than for acknowledging uncertainty or admitting ignorance. This emotional and cognitive resistance is a significant barrier. It is easier, in many ways, to remain in the comfortable bubble of perceived competence, even if that bubble is based on flawed assumptions. The effort required to confront our limitations, to acknowledge the vastness of our ignorance, can feel overwhelming. It is far simpler to maintain the illusion, to continue believing we have a firm grasp on things, rather than step out onto the uncertain ground of genuine inquiry. The analytical depth required here pushes us to consider the specific mechanisms at play. How does the lack of knowledge in a particular domain prevent individuals from recognizing their own incompetence in that very domain? It is a self-reinforcing cycle. Imagine someone trying to learn to play a complex piece of music without understanding musical notation. They can practice. They can try to mimic what they hear, but they lack the fundamental framework to identify why they are hitting wrong notes or missing rhythmic cues. The knowledge of musical notation is not just a skill in itself, it is the very tool that allows them to diagnose their performance errors. Without it, they cannot even begin to perceive the extent of their musical shortcomings. The practical, real-world consequences are clear. They might spend hours practicing, feeling they are improving, only to be unable to play the piece accurately when presented with a clear benchmark or a critical ear. This blindness can extend to professional settings, where a lack of understanding of fundamental principles can lead to flawed designs, ineffective strategies, or even dangerous oversights, all while the individual remains blissfully unaware of the critical errors they are making. Beyond simply stating that experts know more, we must delve into how the nature of expert knowledge inherently fosters a greater awareness of limitations. Expert knowledge is often characterized by what psychologists call unconscious competence. This means that experts perform tasks and apply knowledge so fluidly that they often do not consciously think about the steps involved. They have internalized complex processes to the point of automaticity. This deep internalization, however, also brings with it an awareness of the countless nuances, exceptions, and interconnected concepts that underpin their expertise. A master chef, for instance, does not just know recipes, they understand the chemical reactions of ingredients, the impact of humidity on baking, the subtle art of balancing flavors, and the cultural histories behind different cuisines. This deep, interconnected web of understanding naturally reveals the vastness of culinary knowledge and how much more there is to explore. Their expertise does not make them arrogant. It makes them humble, acutely aware of the intricate tapestry of their field and the many threads they have yet to trace. This is a qualitative difference from novice knowledge, which tends to be compartmentalized and superficial, lacking the depth to reveal its own boundaries. Having begun to understand the profound implications of our limitations and the often unseen ways they can shape our perceptions, the next crucial step is to actively cultivate the disposition that allows us to navigate this landscape of uncertainty with grace and effectiveness. This leads us to explore not just the recognition of what we do not know, but the active practice of intellectual humility. Conclusion: we have traversed the curious terrain of the Dunning-Kruger effect, a realm where overconfidence frequently conceals a startling deficit of knowledge. It is a world where, as Bertrand Russell sagely observed, the fools of the world are of all people the most confident. This book has delved into the mechanics of this phenomenon, how those possessing the least skill are often the least cognizant of their deficiencies, while those with profound knowledge can sometimes be plagued by self-doubt. The central revelation we have unearthed, the guiding luminescence through this often bewildering human predilection, is that true wisdom is not proclaimed from the highest rooftops. Instead, it resides in the quiet, yet potent, acknowledgement of the vastness of our ignorance. This awareness, this intellectual humility, has been our steadfast companion, the indispensable tool for navigating the expansive panorama of doubt and evading the snares of unfounded self-assurance. In these concluding pages, we shall reaffirm these lessons, embrace intellectual humility as our onward path, and look towards a future where understanding flourishes not from the arrogance of certitude, but from the courageous embrace of the unknown. At the core of our investigation has been the illusion of competence, that peculiar mental stratagem wherein a deficiency in skill engenders an inflated perception of ability. Consider the driver who confidently navigates traffic, oblivious to the subtle infractions they commit, or the novice who fancies they have mastered a complex subject after perusing a single article. Their dearth of knowledge precludes them from even discerning the lacunae in their own understanding. This constitutes the foundational pillar in comprehending the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less one knows, the less one can perceive that fissures within one's own knowledge. Subsequently, we encountered the expert's paradox. These are individuals who, through diligent study and practice, have amassed considerable reservoirs of comprehension. Yet, their very expertise illuminates the immense complexity of their domain. They perceive not merely the knowns, but the boundless expanse of the unknown unknowns. Their horizon of doubt, far from signifying weakness, is a testament to their profound learning. This presents a subtle yet critical distinction. The amateur is blind to their ignorance, while the expert is acutely aware of the immensity that lies beyond their present grasp. This leads us to the intrinsic nature of knowledge itself. We have observed how our perception of what we know and what we do not know undergoes dramatic shifts as we learn. The neophyte might feel they have conquered a mountain after a solitary ascent, unaware of the range of peaks yet to be discovered. This inherent challenge to self-awareness implies, at mere perusal of the Dunning-Kruger effect is not a panacea. Recognizing the bias's existence does not automatically inoculate us against succumbing to its influence. It is here that intellectual humility emerges not merely as an abstract concept, but as a vital, active practice. It transcends a simple feeling of doubt. It is a deliberate choice to engage with the world and our own cognitions in a specific manner. It necessitates a genuine openness to novel information, particularly when it challenges our existing convictions. It demands that we actively seek out and value perspectives that diverge from our own, recognizing that others may hold fragments of truth that have eluded us. Crucially, intellectual humility entails the ongoing, unassuming recognition of our own fallibility. It is the quiet admission that we can err, and that our current understanding is perpetually provisional, always amenable to refinement. This practice also aids in decoupling our beliefs from our core identity. When we tether our self-worth too rigidly to the notion of being correct, challenges to our beliefs can feel like personal affronts. Intellectual humility permits us to regard our beliefs as hypotheses awaiting validation, rather than immutable pillars of our existence. We must bear in mind that intellectual humility is a skill, something we nurture over time, much like planting a seed. It does not blossom instantaneously. True understanding, especially when it involves confronting our own biases, requires patience. The unknowns we uncover are not failures, but fertile ground for growth and exploration. In an era often saturated by strident pronouncements and the immediate gratification of echo chambers, intellectual humility stands as a quiet, countercultural force. It is a virtue that thrives not on certainty, but on the earnest pursuit of comprehension. The horizon of doubt, therefore, is not a precipice to be feared, but a beacon to guide us. It is not an emblem of ignorance, but a potent indicator of progress. As our knowledge expands, so too does our awareness of what lies beyond our present comprehension. This expanding horizon of doubt is a hallmark of intellectual maturity, a sign that we are genuinely engaged in learning. The journey of learning and self-discovery is not a destination to be attained, but a lifelong odyssey. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a recurring challenge, one we learn to navigate with increasing adeptness and, crucially, with augmenting humility. By embracing our limitations and actively cultivating intellectual humility, we draw nearer to authentic wisdom, a wisdom characterized by insight, empathy, and a more lucid, accurate perception of ourselves and the world around us. Thus, let us embrace this continuous voyage. Let us practice intellectual humility in our discourse, in our acquisition of knowledge, and in our quiet moments of introspection. May we discover strength not in the illusion of omniscience, but in the courageous and profound embrace of what we are yet to discover.